ICQ Podcast episode 316. Questions, answers and tips. Well, hi and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 316th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Constantino Papas, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, and Leslie Boddington, Golf 4 Juliet Delta Charlie, along with our annual and monthly subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Bill, November 3 Juliet India X-Ray, to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature of questions answered along with tips that have come along over the last few months. Well, as always, it's our donors that keep the show advert-free and stop us thinking about meat boxes, domain names and mattresses made of foam. And for this episode, we'd like to thank Dino, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, Dino Papas. And he just says, nice and simply, Happy New Year to the ICQ family. Dino, many thanks. I know you've been a long-term donor to the show and supporter to the show. And I say thank you very much. He always thinks of us once a year and pops, some value that he finds to the show along to us. Leslie Boddington is a new donor, Golf 4 Juliet Delta Charlie. No message from you, Leslie, but thank you very much for donating. Hope you continue to enjoy the show, and I say your support, along with the monthly and subscription donors, I say is what keeps us advert free. To do your bit and show your value for the show and what you receive, all you need to do is visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate and say whatever you think the show is worth to you. Pop along to us either using PayPal or a credit card donation, and it helps keep us advert free. Right, let's move on with the show, and we're going to join the two Martins, Chris, Frank, Ed and Bill, to discuss latest amateur radio news, including the 432 MHz record is being extended and 70 years of the DARC. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to episode 316, the ICQ News Roundtable, or the podcast rather, and the News Roundtable for this episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Good evening, Martin. Nice to be here.
Yeah, evening, Chris, and I think we're pretty much doing things just about every day this week, aren't we, together?
It's one of those weeks, isn't it? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
one of our mega manic weeks. Also, Mr. Martin Rothwell, who I keep missing, and we keep sort of sending each other messages, but we haven't spoken for a while, have we, Martin?
Well, there's probably a reason for that. I think we've missed each other on Zello, and my local phone cell site has been down recently, so my phone's not been working. But I'm here now, so good evening.
Yeah, good evening, mate. And Martin's call sign's M0SGL. I've also got Mr. Frank Howell over the other side of the pond, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, guys, and glad to be with you once again.
Yeah, good to have you, Frank. In Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Evening, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you with us as well. And last but not least, you need a camera for Bill, I'm afraid, but we have Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX. Hi, Bill.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Or let me redo this again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good evening. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm done now.
That's good out of your system, isn't it?
I like the counts again. That's good. So, yeah.
Yeah. Leslie enjoys the Mickey taking, so he knows it's all done in good fun. But
we love you, Leslie.
Yeah. Leslie's all right.
Bill's just dropped his pork pie in his pint.
Oh, don't let him do that. Whatever you do.
It's a tasty cake.
Oh, yeah. Okay, starting off our first news story. Edmund covered this a little bit in what had he been up to last episode, but G4KUX extended the 432 megahertz tropo record to 4,644 kilometres. Well, that's damn good line of sight in my book, isn't it, Bill?
I'll tell you what, I love the DX stories, especially on UHF. For those on this side of the pond that still use those crazy measurements, that's 2,885 miles. That blows me away. They were using FT8. They had some gain to them, of course. They have a beautiful blog post. But, yeah, G4KUX to D Delta 41 Charlie Victor down in Cape Verde. on 70 SEMS FT8. Wow. I'm impressed.
So I'm feeling quite jealous. I think this is amazing for this sort of, especially this frequency. We're working on 70 SEMS. So there was lots of news. It was discussed on the last recording for 2020 that there was this massive lift on over certainly in the UK and probably other parts of Europe in early January. And of course, I was in America at the time, so I missed it. So I was quite annoyed about that. But there you go. I was watching my friends on Facebook talking about how they got these amazing contacts on VHF and UHF, and of course I was missing out. So there you go. But yeah, it looks like there's been some really exciting and unusual stuff happened at the start of the year, and sadly it seems to have disappeared now. But hey, it might come back.
Oh, with a bit of luck, Chris, with a bit of luck. And I know you were down in Nashville, and Frank threatened to send you a copy of Nashville Cats by the Loving Spoonful, didn't you, Frank?
Oh, great. Yes, I have really just a few words for this, just incredible, but this is dedicated to our fellow presenter, ardent 70 SEMS DXer, Edmund Spicer, Sacre Bleu, c'est incroyable.
Oh, dear. Well, hopefully I'm going to see Edmund in a few days' time. It's not guaranteed, but I might be down his part of the world, so looking forward to catching up with him for a few minutes. But brilliant, this Frank, I say. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, I just like to pass my commiserations on to Ian, GM3SEK, who had the record, the world record. I think he probably only had it for about a day or something before this 80-kilometre further record was made by G4KUX. I'm sure they're great friends, both of them, but just shows you're on top of the world and then somebody beats you. That's it. That's DX.
Yeah, but that's what makes our hobby a little bit, isn't it? Because
the challenge.
The challenge, yeah.
So next time the band opens up, might be somebody else even further north in the UK or in Scotland, I guess.
Yeah. Martin, you've been very quiet. Apart from our local G7 that was talking to himself on your repeater yesterday afternoon, have you done much?
The same guy that I think it was. Have I done much with the tropospherics? No, because I didn't even realise there was much tropo going on. I've been working and doing all sorts of other stuff and had different radio things. But I looked at this story and I thought, hang on a second, G4KUX, why do I know that call sign? And then I think I'm probably thinking of KLX, who does a lot of the D-style programming and things like that. But yeah, impressive. If you look at his QRZ page, he looks to have a pretty impressive antenna system. So he's not just done it with a standard white stick collinear. I'd be even more impressed if it was voice. That I did think, oh wow, really? And then I realized FT8, oh yeah, weak signal mode. But impressive and well done to him.
Yeah, I think it's a good one, and it shows interest in the hobby and what you can do.
I would actually be interested, because Frank mentioned briefly then Edmund and his 70 SEMS DXing. But of course, if you look at any of Edmund's YouTube videos, he's often DXing on PMR 446, which is like handheld half a watt radios with fixed antennas and stuff. I'd be interested to see what Edmund's record is on that.
I think he does quite well, actually.
He does, yeah?
Yeah, because he's out and about and he does it, and you've got to be in it to win it. But it's a good one. That's a good one. Moving on, the DARC, 70 years old, which is quite a new organisation, really, in comparison to all the others. Ed was telling me that Australia is the oldest, and it's interesting that the society is 70 years old, but more interestingly is DL35, German Special Event Station. Maybe you'd like to pick that one up, Ed.
Yeah, okay. Just, obviously happy birthday to the DARC. They're running some special call signs and special DOK, which is like a county definition for their award schemes. So people that are chasing paperwork from awards from the DARC, there's a couple more opportunities there. But as I was saying, the WIA, I think this year, 2020, is 110 years old. So the DARC for West Germany being 70 years old, and what was the other one? The RSV for what used to be East Germany being 30 years old. They're actually, if you're looking at it from a worldwide point of view, quite young, especially when you realise that 35 years ago, Ulrich L. Rode, DJ2LR or N1UL, actually started off the whole SDR thing, or he was one of the ones he presented in the UK on software-defined radio, something that we think is the latest thing nowadays, but in the commercial world has been around for quite a few years. And the fact that this son of Munich actually was one of the leading forces back 35 years ago, it's nice to know that, it's a radio amateur in leading technology. And he also leads a very well-known instrumentation company, Roden Schwartz. Again, amateur radio people in the head of technology, which is good.
Certainly is there, certainly is. Chris, you quite like this one, didn't you?
Well, I think it's 35 years of software-defined radio. I'd imagine in the early days, when you think about the 80s, when the sort of power of computers were, not that great. Back in the 8-bit days, I guess it was quite to be able to sort of think about how this might work back then was pretty ahead of its time. And of course, now we have got computers that are very cheap that can easily process that amount of data. It's we kind of caught up a little bit. So we'll see a real pioneer. I'm actually just looking at his link on his webpage, and actually he's got lots of very interesting equipment and a very, very interesting aerial. I think they're actually using the Roden Schwartz one of their facilities. They've got a huge aerial around the roof. It's quite interesting thing to look at, actually. So obviously an interesting chap, and obviously very, very clever as well. So excellent that they're having a special event to commemorate 35 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, he did the concept of SDR long before we had the technology to do it, which is often the case in some of these technologies. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, as a professor, I would often teach about the institution of science and how the organization of science is laid out and how it functions and all that good stuff. Sometimes on the podcast, we cover a new product, a new strategy for something, and many listeners might think, okay, so what? So there's a RF0 board out there. So what? People may have said that about some of Joe Taylor's stuff on the weak signal. So 35 years ago, this fairly young club, as Ed has articulated, at 70 years old, it was only 35 years old when one of its members, Ulrich Rode, delivered a paper, a sampling of techniques. I haven't read it, but it's probably like some theoretical papers where you've got some ideas laid out. And for someone who makes very, very nice, high-end, and fairly expensive on the retail side test equipment, imagine that paper within 35 years led to a $5 dongle that we can listen to the world on with a USB dongle. And so that's what I think was very prescient about that paper. And I think we ought to take to heart when some people, such as Ulrich Rode and others, have these ideas that don't seem very practical at first, but just look at some examples of what they can yield. So that's how I kind of framed this story. And good on the DARC and good on their members like Ulrich Rode. He's donated some equipment to the ARRL's test lab, as my interview with Bob Allison in a previous podcast talked about. So he's been very gracious over here in the States with his company as well.
Yeah, that's fine, Frank. And it's interesting, and I know his equipment is very, very good. I have to admit, though, I don't own any, so never mind. Martin.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Martin, what do you think on this one?
Well, happy birthday to the DARC for their 70 years. Here's to another 70. And SDR, we talked about, was for 35 years. And, I thought this was a relatively new technology. If you'd have told me it had been developed in the last 10 to 15 years, I'd have completely believed you. But, think what's 35 years ago? 1984, something like that? My thoughts, I'd just be interested to see not just the specs, but also what they look like, the early prototypes before we had like surface mount components and things like that, just to see what they are like, the size, what they can do when you compare them to the likes of like the SDR Play. which is not much bigger than a deck of cards, or the Fun Cube, which is not much bigger than a USB memory stick.
Yeah, but of course that's using the processor in your computer to do most of the work. To be fair, but
Yes,
the technology. I mean, I remember thinking it's slightly off topic, but when I started back in the 90s, there was this big craze about virtual reality and how that would take over the world, and that was the craze at the time. But of course, at the time, the computers weren't really powerful enough to be able to have that horsepower to do virtual reality. You couldn't do that. You weren't really immersed. It was all
4000s to people's backs and things to make.
Yeah, it was just too kind of slow, and of course Chris, now computers have got all that power. Yeah.
Chris, about then, a lab next to me on Mississippi State campus had a room full of Silicon Graphics, SGI, Onyx computers that hosted something called a cave. And you could put gloves on and a headset on and boots and be in a virtual world. And it was like the old sort of ENIAC level mainframes. I mean, it was that kind of beast. Yeah. So I hear you.
Well, what's good is, of course, now the technology is caught up, and that's very easy to do. And any kind of reasonably powerful PC can do that. And so what you're saying is the concept was born at a time when the technology was just perhaps about to be able to do something like that. And of course, now that the technology is caught up, the concept works.
Yeah. Well,
the early prototypes and things were running on things like Commodore 64s and things like that.
Yeah, well, before I bring Bill in, I would guess a lot of this was done on wire wrap boards. And the way we're talking about technology coming on, completely different, I know, Bill, and give me just a second on this, but one of the jobs I had back in the early 80s as a computer engineer, I was working on OCR equipment. And back in them days, the OCR optical character recognition cabinets were, the big grey metal cabinets you get, if you put with two doors on, if you put two of those back to back, that was one cabinet, and we had 10 cabinets full of diode logic. And all the way down the middle was a 5 amp bus bar. And it was a bus bar. It was 5 volts at 150 amps. And it was dead easy to find which board had gone wrong. You just opened the door and sniffed and looked for the the burnout. So, and I was told then, you'll never get this, it will never be much smaller than this because you won't be able to do it. 5 years later, they're doing it on a PC. So, that's how technology moves on. But Bill, sorry, I've probably stolen your thunder.
No, I love that story because I remember those. Because do you remember? Well, we're talking the same time because I was 16 or 17 around that time, and we used to help people with the banks with the OCR for check reading. It would just shoot the checks through and scan them in. Printed checks, if it was a certain kind of ink, it read no problems whatsoever. Everything else, man, you're going through and you're cleaning the optics. You're going through these huge cabinets, exactly, trying to find out where a fault is. And oh my God, do not get a watch on your wrist against that bus bar. You are dead. Oh yeah, I remember those. But anyway, back to the story. Now that I went down nostalgia lane, DL35 SDR. This is going to be a special event station on for the whole year. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Stick it in your Hamler app or keep checking the DX cluster because that's going to be. I think that's going to be a neat contact that they'll get out this year. And oh, by the way, if the propagation reports are right, solar minimum's coming right around April. So things should start getting a little better and towards the end of the year. So if you're having a little trouble getting overseas to Germany with the bands, maybe we'll get some more cooperation at the end of the year.
Yeah, that could be. Oh, and on your check readers, Bill, one of the sets of numbers on a check is magnetic ink. And that's why you probably couldn't get in to read.
That's it.
Micker toner.
That's it.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. Micker.
Yeah. I worked on
it took me a while. It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, it's a long time ago. Well, we're both wearing well, Bill. You better than me, though.
Yeah, well, I was working for the part-time for the local Commodore shop, and when I was 16 or 17 because I was just starting to drive. So it's been a while.
My brother was vice president at what was First National Bank in Atlanta, Georgia then, and one of the he was in charge of balancing in transit, which is what Bill's talking about. It used to be called that in banks, balancing in transit. And what people would do was erase some of that ink on the account number, so it would kick out of that OCR processing, had to be hand processed, and that gave them a few more days to write a bad check and get away with it.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
people tried it on then, and they still try it on today.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Okay, moving forward, going ham at Greenbank Elementary Middle School. I found this interesting originally because I was looking at students being taught ham radio, and then, which is very, very interesting. But Bill, you threw an extra hand grenade in the room on this one. Over to you.
Yeah, so you sent the articles out, and I'm reading this thing. It's like, oh, this is a great story. You know, local ham club helping out the elementary school, helping STEM, ham radio, kids, all the great things. I'm just like, this is great. And then it dawned on me, Greenbank, West Virginia. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Isn't that in the middle of the National Quiet Zone? And sure enough, it's the elementary school near the Greenbank Observatory. So we have this huge chunk of land in America here. It's 107 miles by 109 miles, and it's like 13,000 square miles, 34,000 square kilometers for Martin. It's on the border of Virginia and West Virginia, and it's designated as a radio quiet zone. The idea being is that when they built this observatory, and the Navy used to have a listening station there. I think the NSA is running it, the Navy station now. It's supposed to be low interference, so that it's heavily restricted what you can do in that area. And so things like I'm aware that they have a 2-meter repeater in there somehow. They have 1 or 2 FM broadcast stations that are, I guess, low power, 1 AM station, couple VHF high band stuff for the local emergency services, and pretty much everything else is a no-no. So it's like microwave ovens, Wi-Fi, cell phones. It's the whole thing is incredibly restricted, and it depends on how close you are to the observatory, how deep the restrictions are. Case in point is if you're working right in the area that's right around the observatory where the big radio telescope is, you have to use a diesel engine. You can't even use a gasoline engine because it creates too much RF noise, which is very, very fascinating. The details on if you're a ham radio operator living in the zone, what you have to go through. The website I was looking at it's pretty onerous. So if any of our listeners actually live in the zone, drop us a note at info@icqpodcast.com. I want to have a chat with you because I've been told by multiple people you can use certain bands in there. You just got to tell them, and you can get approval to do stuff. Like, for instance, low power HF is the one I was specifically told about. So I do want a little more detail on that. But in the midst of the most restrictive area in America, they're getting the elementary school up to speed on using radio topics through the local ham club. It's a great story. So what comes up in the show notes, go read it. It's fun.
And it's interesting that it's the ham club and volunteers from the Greenbank Observatory. So actually, the guys themselves that are involved in all this, whatever they do there, are involved as well. So they're obviously doing it's obviously legit. They've obviously been been in touch with them and got the permissions to do what they're doing. So yeah, I think it's a great story.
Well, I'm going to say this and Frank's going to immediately tell the whole story. Is I'm assuming most of the RF engineers that work at the telescope are probably amateur radio operators at some point in their lives.
Yeah, I wonder if part of the reason that they're doing this is because the school kids don't have cell phones, they don't have Wi-Fi for accessing the internet, that they're trying to give them social media, but the original social media, ham radio, so a way to communicate between each other. And, from a social point of view, you can't use, let's say, anything above 1 gigahertz, but you can use amateur radio below it. perhaps.
Well, that'd be certainly a good idea, Ed. Certainly a good idea.
That makes sense. I'm assuming they have internet access there, but I would assume it would be fiber or
cable. That's right.
Cable,
nothing
low band cable.
Yeah, not
high band cable. It'd have to be the real low band stuff.
Yeah, not portable in any way.
No.
Maybe they got fiber to the desk, Bill, so that would cut the noise down. But Frank, go on then. What's your thoughts?
Oh, I just think it's terrific. I always like these stories, and I think it's great when you have people who work for, I don't know, any kind of public agency, in this case, a government agency there at Green Bank, to use their outreach, what they know professionally, what they know personally, as Bill was saying. They're probably ham radio operators. It kind of dovetails with their professional careers, to do outreach to schools. And it's where we tend to find young people most days in schools, and that's just a great vector to do that. And they've got some unique capabilities around Green Bank and what they do to link into, as the article says, the ISS, things like that. So it's just another great story that we've covered here on the podcast about reaching out to young people.
Well, I think if Martin and I were in the States, we'd probably get into trouble here, wouldn't we, Martin? We'd just always get into trouble somewhere.
Without any shadow of a doubt. I mean, you mentioned national quiet zones. I mean, my initial thoughts were national quiet zones. I mean, you can say, hey, don't use wireless stuff, don't use phones, don't use whatever. What about people with these ridiculously, stupidly wideband PLT devices, skyboxes, these stupid things you plug into root Ethernet? People are going to use this technology, unknowing that it exists. So, I wonder about that. But other than that, schools teaching, ham radio, brilliant. And my initial thoughts is it part of the curriculum? Is it voluntary? If you go to their website, we've got the links in the show notes. It looks like they're doing fox hunts, so they've got tape measure antennas and hidden transmitters and things. They talk about their next project wanting to be hot air balloons, and they're going to track it with like APRS and stick a GoPro on board to get some photography with it. Although I do wonder if you're sending a hot air balloon up with a transmitter in it, you can't really control hot air balloons because they tend to go where the wind goes. And surely if you've got a transmitter on board and you're sending it towards what could be a monitoring station, that might not go down well. So, I'd be interested to see where that goes in that sense. But they do say that their ultimate goal is to contact the ISS. And that's relatively easy technology-wise. You can buy off-the-shelf stuff that does that. But then they have applied, and they're just hoping that they will get selected. So I guess the whole thing is if you want to get selected to talk to the ISS, perhaps teaching ham radio in the schools is more likely to get you selected, I dare say. But yeah, good luck to them. I'm really pleased for them.
Yeah, so all in all, I think it's quite a good one. Thanks for raising the quiet zone, Bill, because I didn't know about that. Well,
it's on that. Sorry, Martin, just to finish off. So I had no idea about this until it was mentioned by Bill tonight. I drove down the I-81 for about 200 miles or something a few weeks ago. I had no idea. As it happened, I didn't have a radio in the car. Had I had a radio in the car, I'd have been talking on that all the way down there. I have no idea that I was breaking the rules. So, yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, as I say, you'd have joined Martin and me in the Bad Boys Club for that one, Chris.
Yeah, it depends on the zone and how close you are to the telescope. I guess they have like rings and that kind of stuff with restrictions. Yeah. So at the very edges, you're probably okay. I didn't even know about it until 10 years ago, maybe. And I used to go down 81 all the time through there. And I'm like, why do I have no cell phone signal through here? It's really weird. I'm on top of a mountain ridge. That's why.
Just out of interest, I mean, the problem for the guys in the UK, do we have anything like this here? And the only reason I ask this is because years ago I was working in Hastings. I used to drive down. Is it the A22? I forget. It's one of the A roads goes down to Hastings, and there's a particular point down there where my phone would reset itself. It would just switch itself off and then reboot. And I used to think it was my phone, and then and later on, in the year when I got a new phone, the new phone did it. And even sort of my partner's phone at the time on a different network did the exact same thing. So I wonder if we ever have anything similar here.
Not that I'm aware of, but there is an allocation, the bottom end of the 70 SEMS band, that you're not allowed to operate within 60 miles of Charing Cross.
One Charing Cross, isn't it? I think is that an MOD stuff they've got going on near there?
No, I was actually told, and lots of people think it's MOD, I was actually told, if you go back in history, that's where the National Trunk Radio came out of. So people who had like pre-mobile phones who had two-way radios in the car and national for the whole of the UK, it came out of there. And
have you ever listened there and heard anything?
I haven't, no.
Right.
Guys, I've got a list of all the EMF quiet zones in the world, supposedly.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do not see one for the United Kingdom. There's one in Italy, there's one in France, there's one in Spain, there's one in Australia, one in Canada, two in Canada, actually, although one's not complete. And in the U.S., there's one near Colorado, near Rockville, Grass Valley, California, coming online, and then in White Mountains in Arizona, under construction. Another one at Snowflake, Arizona, and one in the Utah-Colorado borderland. So there are a few of these, and there's an EMF-experts.com is a website that has a lot of this and some maps and things, if you're interested.
So I think what we can learn from this story is that America like their RF quiet zones.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, Martin, and I'll have to explain to Frank and Bill afterwards, because this is somewhat naughty and UK amateurs might
really
understand.
From you, and you do surprise me.
Yeah, I think we should have a quiet zone round Ashton.
Careful, Martin.
Yeah.
Is that where the repeater is?
Hey? No, I'll explain later. Right, let's move on before I get in a serious
might be an edit
trouble.
point.
No, not necessarily.
Just to follow up quick, the country is so large here that we can actually have an RF quiet zone without destroying commerce.
Yeah, no probs, Bill. No probs. Okay, we must move on. Tunisia has just issued 3 personal amateur radio licenses, so you can operate in that particular country now, or they have 3 people that can operate at home. Since 1956, you were only allowed to operate from a club station if you were an amateur radio license holder. So this could be an interesting one to go forward. Go on, Martin, you haven't gone first before.
I was going to say, where's the fun in that if you can only operate from your club station? I mean, there's benefit if your club's got a big station and you can get to play with that all the time. But I think we were talking about there are potentially other reasons. I did wonder, how come they aren't allowed? Did no one want this? But I understand there are more in-depth rules as to why people might not be allowed to operate from home. But I wonder what the exception is for the 3 guys that have now been permitted to operate from home. I think, we'll be saying that the club stations might be under a certain amount of supervision, and these guys at home, are they on the list? I don't know.
No, I think what's happened is the law's been changed now so that anybody can apply for a individual license, whereas before the law said you could only ever operate from a club station.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because I've seen other reports on this news item as well, and it is that the law has been changed to be similar to what we're used to. Then, yeah. So they're just normal. They're not. These 3 people are just the first 3.
Oh, I got you right.
But somebody mentioned before the show started that this was a place that DXpeditions like to go to. I wonder how they managed that with the licensing. That must have been something very special.
I imagine it's pretty rare and people want to work. I mean, when these 3 guys got on the air, it says that they'll soon be on the air. There's the 3 call signs: 3 V8HB, 3 VHMN, and 3 3B1. MB will be on the air. He says they've actually had their stations examined. They've also gone through a bit of a process to get this thing sorted out.
Yeah.
But I imagine once they got on the air, they're going to be pretty busy. They're pretty rare to work Tunisia. So, and in fact,
But you think, like when we get new call signs here, like when the M7s and things come out, people jump on them. Think how this is going to be. Not just a new suffix for one country. This is, pretty much a new country.
This is almost like North Korea, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Not that wanted, but wanted.
Yeah.
I looked this up in Clublog, which is one of my favorite websites, by the way. If you aren't using Clublog and you like DX, you should be using Clublog. It's really nice. Most wanted rank for Tunisia is 188, and the main reason why is exactly what I said earlier, is there's a large amount of DXpeditions that have been around over the years. And so, for instance, in like 2003, some group got 18,000 contacts out of there. 2009, they got 33,998, so almost 34,000 contacts in 2009. That was a big year. 2013, 17,000. And then it peters down after 2016. So there's been peaks and valleys here on the club log. So that means that always gives me indications that, big DXpeditions went there, or somebody was living there on long term and this was, what they did for fun. Never been on 60 meters there, so they must not have 60 meters. Never been on 6 meter data, which, they're right on the Mediterranean. So I'm not sure what happens there. There's a lot of room here for folks to have a lot of fun getting on the air, because you're exactly right. It'll be a major pileup. They haven't had anybody on 10 meter CW, or last QSO on Club Log was 2010. So there's going to be a lot of wanted contacts out of this crew. So I feel for the new licensees. They're going to be swamped when they get on the air for sure.
Yeah, well, it sounds good. And if no 10 meters CW, or maybe Dan will get excited and want to go there and do the CW. But no, I'll behave myself, Dan. Sorry. Frank, do you want to have the last words on this one?
Oh, I think it's terrific, and I was not as aware as some of the other presenters, about Tunisia as a DX entity and what was going on there. I was not aware about the club operation restrictions, so I learned some things, which is very good. And my general comment was, I see it as a personal challenge to see if any one of the three speak English, because I'd like to interview them about this experience. So that gives me a new challenge.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good. And as you said earlier, we can always press gang Edmund into doing translations for us if need be, or doing the interview in French even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to get the interview in French, and then you're going to have to do it like they do on the news, where you dub it back over and into English.
Yeah.
We'll get Leslie to do the dub.
Oh. There you go.
Get Leslie to do different voices for the different people.
Behave.
He'd be up for it, I reckon.
I know he would. And he'd enjoy it too. Anyway, moving on. YOTA month was a success in America, and I spoke to Ruth about this, and she told us at the last episode that she'd been involved with YOTA in the States, and she operated K8B. Sorry, tell a lie. K8Y. But I don't think any of us managed to catch Ruth on, but there was a lot going on. Frank, do you want to go first on this one?
Yes. And, we've talked about YOTA and the organization in different countries and things, and was glad to know that Ruth was able to participate as one of our co-presenters. And this is just a terrific, terrific thing. We've talked long and hard about how to get young cohorts of people into it, and contesting as they grew up on competitive games. And I know Bill is into a competitive gaming mode right now with brushing up his CW ability. So, that competitive spirit is a good tool to leverage, and that's sort of what YOTA does. So I was glad to see it, and I think it's just being very successful.
Agree with you, Frank. Agree with you full-hearted on this one. Go on, Bill. He told us that you play games. Well, you did do a feature for us on CW Morse Invader,
CW
didn't
Invaders.
you? Yeah.
Yes, that was my most favorite frustrating game. Definitely not Overwatch. I'm still stuck on level 5 on that thing for anyone that cares. So every time I see somebody that gets in the 20s on Twitter, I retweet it like, CW Invaders, because I'm using a keyer and paddles, and most of these guys that post on Twitter that are getting beaten the game are using straight keys. So it just blows my mind. But anyway, YOTA month. I tried to get some of the YOTA folks, specifically chasing KAA the one day. I just couldn't hear them on 20 meters. But they were able to work 12,467 QSOs over the month with the various special event stations. That is, I don't care how you slice it, that is a great job by everyone involved. I'm confident that they're going to do it again next year, or this year, because we're in January. Yeah, so it'll be December again, hopefully, and we'll go through there. And the stats are online, so if you want to go look at it, it'll be in the show notes. But they got stats up, so... And, Frank loves the numbers, right, Frank?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is great. And when my only involvement on the periphery of this was when the UK hosted YOTA a couple of years ago, and Martin and I went, and we saw a lot of very enthusiastic youngsters, didn't we, Martin?
Oh, they were amazingly successful and happy, weren't they? Which one was the YOTA one? This was, because we've done a couple, haven't we? This was the one in the Scout place, wasn't it? Was it Gilwell Park?
Yeah, it was at Gilwell Park when you made poor, Steve fall off his chair.
Oh yeah, the RSGB guys, yeah. Do my CB lingo, that shocked them a little bit. Yeah, so I'm sure we've done a couple of YOTA ones, but well, YOTA's always a success, isn't it? Well done to them. It's great to get activity on the bands, and you think when you tune around at the moment with the sunspot cycles as low as they are, there is not much out there. There is stuff like that, but there's not as much going on. So when you get a station like this, particularly one that if it's if it's pushing a little bit more power, if it's got younger people on the air, it's great to get the calls in there. And so if we talk about router operating stations like this, we should probably have have an agreement between the group that we ping each other, we ping the group list when we're going to be on them. We can at least have a chat. I don't know. I've ever spoken to any of the guys over the pond on the air. I've heard Ed on HF, but I don't think I've ever heard any of the US guys on the air yet.
Yeah. Well, I think I've worked Ed from HMS Belfast, or I think that was
where I heard him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've worked, haven't I, Ed?
Yeah, and Ireland as well, I think.
Yeah. I think it was very, very weak when I was in Ireland. But yeah,
that's very rare DX if you get Colin in Ireland, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And also against the law. But yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to point out the YOTA scheme has been going in Region 1 of IARU for several years now and is very successful. What I'd like to say is that the Region 2, so in other words, the Americas, has only really started last year. And the fact that they've managed to get all this put together and had such a success in December with the YOTA month is really very well done by the guys and girls behind the organisation of YOTA in Region 2. And there was actually at least one station on in Region 3, which is, the Pacific areas, which was ZL6 YOTA, which I actually heard, but I couldn't get in because there was such a pile-up. It was too much of a fight. I couldn't get through. I'd have loved to have got through to talk to them. But good to see that YOTA is starting up in Region 3 as well. But I just want to echo that the fact that the people behind it in the US or in the Americas managed to get these 4 call signs, get the people organised and everything else really quite quickly to coincide with the already running YOTA December month is my hat's off to them for organising something like that. It bodes well for the YOTA camp this coming summer in Ohio, near Cincinnati, isn't it, at Voice of America. So I think we'll need to keep a good look at how that's going, and let everybody else know how they're going with that, because it's really good to see youth coming into the hobby.
Certainly is, and as I say, Chris, this is great publicity for our hobby, isn't it?
It is. In fact, it was good because I mean, it's really encouraging, I think, to get young people on the air and actually get them to work a radio. I think it gives them a good reason to actually be part of the hobby. I think it's a good motivator. So it was great. I mean, I worked a couple of the stations early in December. I'll check my log earlier. I definitely remember working a couple of the YOTA stations in Europe. I did hear some of the state ones, and I thought I'd work one, but I checked my log, and it looks like it's not in there, so maybe I didn't quite manage to get through. They were all very busy, which is great. So actually, people wanted to work them, and I think that would have really encouraged and motivated and inspired people to, all the youngsters that were there, to really continue in the hobby. So I think it was a good all round, really. So yeah, all for it, and good luck to the guys. I think it's Neil, isn't it, arranging the event in the States later in the year in Ohio. So good luck with that. I think, as Ed was saying, I think they've done a pretty good job of getting things going this time in the States. So, yeah, well done, and hopefully it will continue year on year.
Jump in one last bit to answer Ed's question. Bryant Rascal, KG5HVO, was the YOTA month coordinator here in the Americas.
Oh, that's great, Bill. And as I say, I agree with everything you guys have said. Smack on the money there for that one. Moving down, leadership elections to highlight in between January the 17th and 18th for the ARRL board meeting. So it ain't that far away, Frank, because we're recording this on the 15th. So by the end of the week, they should have had a bit of a powwow, shouldn't they, Frank?
Yes, and full disclosure, as many listeners know, I'm an assistant director for the Delta division of the ARRL, and sort of involved in some of the preparation for my division director, who serves as a board member, Dave Norris, K5UZ. It's important to note anytime there's potential for change at the ARRL, that we just need to be aware of that, particularly if we're members. And there'll be an election for president, first and second vice presidents, international affairs vice president, the secretary, the treasurer, the chief executive officer, and the chief financial officer. And the board will also choose members to serve on the executive committee and the ARRL Foundation board. And so by the time our podcast drop on Sunday is the projected time, the results will be in, and I'm sure they'll be reported on the ARRL website. So we'll see if any significant change happens, and there's a usual rotation for at least president and that sort of thing, and we'll see what happens.
But what I want to know, Frank, is did you put Bill forward for president?
Well, I failed to do that. I let my colleague down in that regard, and I actually didn't nominate anyone. But I will tell you, I like Bill far too much to have actually gone through with a nomination.
All right. Okay. Go on, Bill.
Yeah, that's my interesting point about it is that if they pick these positions from the board of directors, which they seem to do quite often, you lose your board vote. So it's like, oh yeah, so you can be the ARRL president, or you can actually have a vote. So I always found that very interesting. So I'm assuming that limits the pool of those who went through to become directors or not. Other than that, I mean, we'll know more by the time the podcast comes out how it shakes out here for the year. Because they do this every year, don't they, Frank?
I think it's 2 years. I may be wrong about that, but I think the president's term is 2 years. But I could be, I don't have that committed to memory. But
yeah, I don't either. Because like I said, this will be interesting to see what happens, and we'll get the minutes afterwards to see what other stuff they got to talk about.
Quick question from me. So I assume some of those being elected then are actually employees that are paid to work for the ARRL rather than just volunteers. Is that right?
Yes, and that's an interesting thing, isn't it?
Well, some of
them. Yeah, I was going to say. Well, yeah, absolutely. So in the UK, the RSGB, we also have elections, but they're for the volunteer positions. People like the presidents, etc., are elected. But people that are employees, people like the general manager, people that work on the commercial side of the RSGB, people that run the business almost, they're employees. I don't think there's an election for them. I think they're just kind of employed and they go through a kind of a recruitment process. So that's an interesting difference between the UK and the US.
Well, it is, and of course, we interview Howard Mickle after each board meeting, at least for the last year or two, and I would surmise that election, if you will, is more of a reappointment. And remember, Dave Sumner, previous effective CEO, I think the title was different. He was in that job 40 years. I mean, so it was kind of pro forma. There have been some changes, in how things are operating. Because to Bill's point about the president voting, remember, part of the brouhaha that Dan Romanchik and I both have commented on, and Dan's written blog posts about, was to give the president a vote, and that was, and some others, and so that was would have been quite a change. But yeah, Chris, your point's very well taken for a difference for the ARRL.
I guess it's just a cultural thing maybe between the UK and the US, but yeah, it's interesting.
So, some of them, I believe, are unpaid positions. But
yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, the CEO and CFO are paid positions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're running the business part of the ARRL. So
yeah,
that makes sense. Ed, what's your thought?
I can't really say anything about it because it's not something that I know the insides of, like our two colleagues here know a lot better.
Yeah, I appreciate it's an American story, and you, Martin, and myself probably don't have much input on this one. I know Chris is Eh?
We could speculate.
Oh, you can speculate then if you want. Go for it.
With the best of them. With the best of them.
I was going to say, I nominated you, Martin, because, you've got loads of free time, haven't you, for president?
No, I was going to I was going to say something that would have spoiled our clean rating, Martin.
Martin, I believe if I'm learning some of my British dialogue, that would be you gobsmacked him.
I think he probably did for that one.
The only thing that I'll say to this, and of course the elections are taking place in the next couple of days as we record this, and by the time we release this, as Frank said earlier, that the results will be in. But just remember, if you didn't vote, you don't have the right to whinge that the people you voted for, or you would have voted for, didn't get in.
Dead true. So, it's an interesting event. As I say, Ed and I don't really have a lot to say about this one. As Ed said, we're not your side of the pond, but it's worth bringing it up because we do have a large number of American listeners as well. Another ARRL story, and I think Ed might have put this one in. It's a follow-on from our last episode where we were talking about podcasts and the ARRL podcast. So, Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I will do. Just the fact that two of the, I think 3 or 4 podcasts that the ARRL produce, so the So Now What and The Doctor Is In podcasts, I understand, have now finished their run. And now this is the announcement for the first of the new batch. And it's going to be a podcast called On the Air, and it's a companion podcast to the On the Air magazine, which is the new magazine that has just been released by the ARRL and is both a paper magazine and a digital magazine. And this is the companion podcast for it. The podcast, the magazines are only available to members, but the podcast is available to everybody, including us at this side of the pond that aren't even members. So it's going to be interesting to see how relevant this is without having the magazine, so to speak. I miss the fact that they got rid of The Doctor Is In, but there is another one coming up. I can't remember what it was called. Some extended name. I can't remember what it was now. But so this is the start of the new set of podcasts for the ARRL. So if people are following the ARRL podcasts, they'll need to reprogram their apps to pick up the new ones.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things Martin was saying about a couple of episodes ago about how do you find out about these? Where's the URL? Where's the RSS feed? Aren't you, Martin?
Absolutely. I mean, my initial thoughts are ARRL make podcasts. They kept that quiet. Yeah, I searched for the ARRL on my podcatcher of choice. I found 3 with the ARRL in the title, which said Ed said 2 of them are apparently dead. So, if these podcasts are dead, I would probably go about using the original RSS feeds that people may already have, and therefore they don't have to try and push. And effectively, you and I both know that if you're starting a podcast now, you are going to struggle to pull an audience. We only pull an audience because you and Colin started it back in 2008, when podcasting was in its infancy, and we've built the audience since then. ARRL, yes, they're a big organisation. They can potentially pull an audience, but you've got to get the message out there, and you're not that big that you can get that message out there. How are you going to do it? Where are your RSS feeds? They should be out there now, not when your first episode is ready to go. Get your thing out now. Get a promo up. Just get a 30-second trailer. Hey, this is the ARRL. We're coming soon to you with a brand new podcast.
Well, actually, they've done that.
Where is it?
You can you can see it on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts.
Yeah,
and it's like you say, it's a 30-second, 1-minute introduction for the podcast. But
30% of the world can see this. iPhone users.
Well, I wouldn't even say the iPhone users can see it. The people going to the website can see it, because it doesn't give the actual RSS feed for some reason. By the way, just the other podcast that's coming along, which will start on February the 13th, is called Eclectic Tech, and that's one.
And there's a trailer for it out now. There's a trailer.
There's a trailer up for that as well. Yeah.
And that's on Stitcher.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be on iTunes, Stitcher, and Blueberry. Looks like they're actually hosting off Blueberry, from what I could see. But I might be
I'm
wrong.
looking at the link and the page for it on Stitcher.
But the search engines for a lot of the app doesn't appear to be finding these. So again, it's going to take us a while to actually find the correct actual RSS feed URL, and then from then add it in manually. That's not going to get them a lot of listeners.
Right, well, I'm going to just come in on what Martin said, and I agree with you, Ed. And before we get lots of feedback, and I'm quite happy to get lots of feedback, we are not knocking the ARRL.
Not at all.
I think the situation is, when you give somebody criticism, providing it is constructive criticism, that is good. And we're not bitching at them. We're saying, we're users, and that's the problem.
I think the fair thing to say is we're worried that they're not going to be able to get as many people listening to these podcasts as they deserve.
I think so, yeah.
I think actually, sorry, go on, Mike.
I was going to say there's enough room in the market for everybody. And just quickly on Martin saying that Colin and I started this in 2008. Yes, we did. But I think the reason we've got our listenership is because of the personality of the presenters. And you guys make it, and in fairness across the board, it does take time for a podcast
it's been built over time, hasn't it?
Eh?
But of course, it's been built over time. You could bring all of us into a new show, whatever the subject may be, and you could release it today. It's going to take years before you get anywhere close to the audience we've got now.
Yeah, and the chemistry between the presenters. And every time we bring a new presenter on, it takes 6 or 7 episodes before that person feels comfortable. We don't give them a hard time, but it is time that bring people on and they settle in. I suggest all you guys would agree with that.
And I will just, as you said, Martin, I'm not to clarify, I'm not knocking the ARRL.
Yeah.
What I say is tongue in cheek, but we've been there.
Yeah.
We know the struggle you're going to go through. We can help you. Talk to us.
Yeah, constructive criticism.
What I was going to say was that, okay, I've retired a couple of podcasts. I know we discussed this last time about the fact maybe they haven't publicised them very well. But the fact we're now talking about this new podcast means that now again people are hearing about it because we're talking about it. And no doubt it's on other, this in itself is a news story. So actually it's going to get some publicity now. So hopefully the new podcast might do better, which is, I think
listeners might tune over, have a listen.
Absolutely.
There's enough room for everybody, guys. Enough room for everybody.
Yeah,
okay, let's move to the right side of the pond for this podcast, where their core business is going to come from and their core listenership. Frank, you go first on this one. What do you think?
I think all the comments are very reasonable and very constructive. I think Ed's concern about getting a podcast, but you don't get the magazine. There's an old saying here. I'll wax in my southern dialect here. And these here parts, why buy a cow when you get the milk free? So, it is a come on to become a member of the ARRL. They are a membership organization. And so that's why, the On the Air magazine is available to members. And yet the ARRL audio news and then the podcast called On the Air is given free. That's not terribly unusual. I think all the comments about publicity are right on. As the comic strip character in the U.S., Pogo, used to say, we met the enemy and he's us. Well, I are one of the ARRL by volunteer status. So I will relay these kinds of concerns and suggestions that we've all made here of how to help get the word out, because there are a lot of ARRL members across the pond on your side. So any of us on here could also, who's across the pond, could be an ARRL member, and they get into the silo of groupthink. I know, Bill, at your university, there's never like a not invented here syndrome, and we're the only ones that know how to do it. We can all get into that kind of group thinking. So Joel Hallis, who was the doctor in the Doctor's Inn, has had some medical problems, and I think that and a little bit of the unknown part of that was part of the impetus to retire the Doctor is In. On Martin Rothwell's point, what they've done to preserve that link, Martin and the Q, is they've run kind of some previous best received episodes to kind of keep the podcasts coming out, even though they are kind of recycled old ones. And then this new one is hosted by Steve Ford, who was the co-host of The Doctor is In. So I think all these comments are constructive, and I'm sure that Howard Mickle will take them well, and I will personally relay them to him in an email. And I think they do listen, because I think they're trying to, to make things better. At least I think so.
Yeah. Well, Bill, have the final word on this one.
I wish them lots of luck. I mean, it's very exciting that they're going to come out with a new podcast. I mean, so let's wish them luck and listen to it. I will say that since they sent out the link here about the new magazine, I mean, I'm on page 19 of it already, just leafing through here while Frank was talking. That's how long you were talking, Frank.
Well, I talk slowly, Bill.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so the article I'm picking on right away is one wire, many bands. This easy build uses low loss feed line and an antenna tuner to give you access to several HF bands. This article's great. I'm really impressed. So this bodes very, very well, just in general as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's good. And in fairness, I think all of the presenters, not just the ones here tonight, will wish the ARRL every success in putting out some quality products, and I believe they will be quality.
Yep, so we do.
And in fairness, there is enough room. There is enough room for podcasters. If you're out in the morning in the gym, you're walking your dog, whatever, there's enough. We only put out something once a fortnight. Others put out on a fortnightly basis or weekly basis, and there's enough there.
You can never have too many podcasts, because it gives people choice, and it gives the rest of us something to set our levels against. If you've only got one podcast, there's no reason for it to be a massively good podcast. If there's lots of them out there, everyone's going to try their best.
I agree.
Really great content.
Yeah, I agree. And we've improved with age, which is unusual for you and me, innit, Martin? But but there you go. So I'm really pleased with this one. We wish the ARRL every success. Okay, let's start finding out what you guys have been up to. Chris, You've been on foreign soil out there with the boys?
I've been pretty busy, but not with amateur radio. I mean, over the holiday season, I was over in the States, as discussed earlier. So I was over in Virginia and then over into Tennessee, to Nashville. Did a little bit of operation. I managed to work one station, a certain N3GIX, I think it's in Pennsylvania. It was only a very short contact, but I did actually manage to work Bill, didn't I, Bill?
Yes, you did.
I don't know how well you could hear me, but I recorded it and played it back to you. I think I could hear you fine. I think I was quite quiet, I think, at your end, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were definitely down in the mud, and then some digital signals came up on 75 meters that, I don't know, well, I have my suspicions as to what happens.
Yes.
I think I chose a bad place in the band where misbehaviors hang out.
Anyway, well, it was good. It was nice to make. It was nice to actually work another presenter on the air, which was good. So that was good. But apart from that, not done an awful lot of amateur radio really in the last, since the last episode really. Plans. Well, we are doing a club visit, kind of related to radio, for the radio club that you and I are a member of, Martin, which is to the Science Museum in London, which will be good. Coming up in a few weeks' time. They've got an exhibition there around ciphers and things. Well, it's kind of to do with GCHQ, which is the UK's kind of version of the NSA. So kind of to do with cryptography and that sort of thing. So there's an exhibition there. It's 100 years since they were formed, so they're doing they've got a bit of an event going on there, so that'll be good. Apart from that, nothing else particularly planned. I think, Martin, you were talking about perhaps going to a rally in a few weeks, but I'll let you talk about that one when it's your turn. So, that's kind of it from me, really. Not too much.
Okay, Chris. Well, it sounds like it was good, and I know you did actually spend time with your family up north as well before going off to the States. So,
that's right, yeah.
Which was good over Christmas. Good time. Martin, we really have missed you, but that's just you and I being so busy at different ends of the scale, isn't it?
I just have my work is quite busy, and I commute to central London every day, and I just never get a chance to do anything anymore. Even my commute has no signal on it because it's on the London Underground. But I'm around. I'm here. I'm around. What have I been doing though? I'm going to say D-Star. I'm going to say Fusion and Zello. I've been working as well. So needless to say, broadcast radio has been in there. TMR is not working again. Surprise, surprise. Local repeaters off the air. The next local repeater transmitting an unknown talk group. And I think we had a discussion. I think you mentioned you think that some talk groups have changed. So probably going to give up with DMR. I've just had enough of it. And other than that, Fox has bitten through two of my antenna cables on two separate days, one of which was in a garden hose to protect it from the foxes biting through it. And there's just a tiny little bit just by the earth rod that isn't in the garden hose. And which bit do you reckon it bit through? Yeah, it did that. So I've got to repair those. Fortunately, one of them is bitten off quite near the bottom of the aerial. So that's just a case of chop that back, put a new connector on it and reconnect it to the aerial. The other one, it's another bit of coax that I've got to put up the side of the tree. But I can do that. And I'm going to do it when it's a little bit drier and a little bit less windy. I don't quite fancy climbing the tree in the rain and the Storm Brendan that's coming through at the moment. I don't fancy climbing it in that. So I'm off HF for a while, but quite happy with my D-Star and my Fusion, I think, for the moment.
Yeah, that's good. And be careful, because I fell off a ladder back in September, and the older you get, the longer it takes to heal, and it was
Mate,
painful.
you know, safety is always my number 2 priority. You know this.
I do. That's why I'm warning you. But yeah, as I say, good to know you have been on. Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, rather than covering what I've been up to, I'd like to take this couple of minutes to thank the 2 people who actually sent comments on my feature from last week. They posted them on the ICQ podcast website, and that's Keith Williams. And just scrolling down to try and get the next person. Here we go. Tim Beaumont. And they made comments about my feature about is it worth setting up a compromised contest-struck DX station. And all the comments they made there are very pertinent, very good. I'd suggest anybody that listened to the feature last week take a look at the website. The comments are attached to the bottom of the posting for not last week, 2 weeks ago. The feature, very very good comments. But what I said in that feature, I'll echo again now. If we have listeners who want to make comments about anything in one of our shows and they want to add to it or correct us, by all means post the comments on the ICQpodcast.com site. But if you can record it yourself and send it in, you can get your own voice on the air or on the podcast, and that's nicer, because Martin and Colin have always said it's a podcast from amateurs for amateurs. So it'd be nice to have some of the listeners' voices on. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, I agree with you. And we've always said amateurs should have their say. At the moment, you're still on the front page of QRZ for this the current episode, which was your feature. From memory, you've had about 4,300 views on QRZ, 23 comments.
And yeah, I just really want to promote, if we could get some listeners, don't be shy, put something together, record it on your mobile phone. It doesn't matter. Quality isn't the point here, it's content. And it would be nice to have more listeners actually take part in the programs, if we can manage to get that happening over the next, year. Maybe that's a New Year's resolution.
Yeah, no problems at all. Or get in touch with us and I'll record it this end. It's not a problem. As long as we can find a mutual time, because I work shift work, but it's not a problem. We can do that. And I'm very pleased with that, Ed. And
but I'm very happy with the response we got back from that, and it's nice to know the quality of listeners that we have. You are appreciated, guys and gals.
Bill, what have you been up to?
Quite a bit. Summary, actually, since the last time I've been on is I worked the ARRL Reedy Roundup contest for a little bit from the house. I didn't get as much time as I was hoping. So I got to work about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I only stuck to Reedy mode. I didn't switch over to FT8 or FT4. I ended up working 56 stations and 39 multipliers. So that's good for 2K around there for score. So that's good. I also worked one Whiskey 4-stroke November 4 Charlie Tango Hotel on 70-meter phone. We already talked about that. I have a checklist and I will follow it. I did actually work some. I actually worked some stations on 15 meters FT8 when the band was nice the other weekend, which was unexpected. Trying to get Falkland Islands was on 12 meters according to the DX cluster, but I couldn't hear them. But I was able to get some stations on 15 meters. It's nice to hear a little bit of life back in one of my favorite bands. And finally, I spent quite a bit of time on the 10th reading the Open Research Institute's grant proposal. They are putting a proposal in for an open source digital multiplexing transponders for the amateur radio service microwave bands. These digital multiplexing transponders will be suitable for deployment in geostationary orbit. So the idea being is they want to get the hardware and software grant done open source, so anybody can use it anywhere under the whatever license they pick that's open source. Right now, we don't have. If a company came to any of the I always say AMSAT, but any of the space related amateur radio groups and said, hey, we got space on a geostationary satellite for a payload for amateur radio. We need it in 18 months for integration. We don't have anything in North America. So I think this is my reading between the lines interpretations is that, hey, we should have this ready because somebody, who knows who, I'm guessing, somebody said there might be possibilities for us to piggyback onto a geostationary satellite here in the North American and South American hemisphere. And they want to make sure that we have something fully done, developed, vetted, paid for from a grant, so they're not fundraising like crazy. And oh, by the way, because it's open source, in theory, they should be able to consider it public domain, which will get around the U.S. export control constraints that we have on satellite launches. So it'll get around the ITAR rules. So I read this whole thing. It's like 60 some odd pages, and it's exciting. It's very exciting. I'm very excited. I hope we get a geostationary satellite. I'm so jealous of you guys over in the EU. So, and this will be digital. So the QO100 has linear transponders on it, so it's analog. You can run digital modes, but it's still an analog trans. This would be completely digital. So there's a lot of issues and interesting possibilities with that. But I mean, one of the things that I always think of after the hurricane rolled through Puerto Rico was, boy, I really wish we had a geostationary satellite, could have dropped, digital systems out there and got them back on the air, and relatively easily by just pointing into space, which is, oh, by the way, what the Red Cross eventually did. So very exciting. So that's all I've been doing at this point, and we'll hope things go well from there.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, Bill. Really interesting. And sounds, hopefully we'll hear more about it. Frank, yourself, what have you been up to? You've been quiet, I think, over the last few weeks.
Well, I've been doing things, but there's two things that I'll mention. And one, the last podcast episode this team put out, Bill Barnes and I went on at some length, and I think we expressed our personal convictions about libraries and the role that libraries play. And there was a story that we covered about someone who retired, and there was a donation to the library and this kind of thing. And I promised Bill in the podcast that I made a commitment that I would donate a copy of the ARRL handbook to a local library. Well, what's happened since then is I've created an initiative called Plant the Seed, Sow the Future. And it's a promotion for ARRL affiliated clubs to donate what's called the ARRL book set to your local library. The ARRL has a library book set deal where there's 10 books, the handbook, the antenna book, and then 8 others that for $200, including shipping, that you can buy for donation to a library. So my club last night, the Central Mississippi Amateur Radio Association, donated $400. They donated $390, but I'm going to cover up the $10 shortfall to do that for 2 libraries. At the ARRL board meeting, my division director is going to promote that for the ARRL, rolling that out nationally, but we will definitely do it in the Delta division. So, Bill, I've kept my promise. I think maybe a couple of times over, and we're donating 20 books, 2 sets of 10 to local libraries. And the Plant the Seed, Sow the Future initiative should be announced by the Delta division as early as next week. We've got a logo and some things like that. So was glad to be involved with that. The second thing that I'll mention is personal, but it involves radio. It's not amateur radio. Those of us who have had the opportunity to attend college, you do college in lots of different ways. There's the party school image. There's this, that, and the other. One of the things that I did while I was an undergraduate back between the years of 1971 to 75 was as a challenge at Georgia College in Millersville, Georgia. I said, we need to have our own radio station. I hear tell there was this famous station over across the pond called Radio Caroline that was playing this newfangled rock and roll music and that kind of thing. And so in the U.S., having a college station was a thing. It was kind of and if you were a good school, a fun school, you had a station. So I spent almost all 4 years working with my roommate and fraternity brother and built a 10-watt FM radio station. WXGC was the call sign. Our slogan was 88 Rocks. And so life goes on, and now 45 years later, some of the students, given that I'm 67, I'll refer to them as kids, they want to know, hey, man, we love the station, now called WGUR The Noise. How did this thing get started? So they went back through college yearbooks and newspapers, and they found some stories about me and found me. And they have a podcast called the 478 Podcast. 478's the area code for the telephone system there. And so they did over an hour long, about an hour and a half long podcast with Greg Duckworth and me to kind of talk about that history and this kind of thing. And they've just announced their new website, and I just saw it today. And at the end of gcsuradio.com, the about, here's what they had to say. 45 years later, WGUR believes in the power and voice of Georgia College students. The station itself is a testament to that. One student had an idea and turned that idea into a movement, a thriving organism, an outlet for freedom and creativity for generations of students that would come after him. So I guess I'm extraordinarily humbled and honored that they care. Where did this come from? And it's probably one of the most touching tributes I've ever received, that something I did 45 years ago is still blowing and going. They've got 50 students that work at that station, and so it's still out there. So that's kind of what I've been doing, Martin.
Yeah, that's a really good story, Frank, and really interesting, and you must be proud of it. 45 years, mate. Well, I don't think I'm going to make 45 years on the podcast, but we're getting on there, but nowhere near that. But all very well, Frank, and that's great. Well, I've done a few things since the last podcast. I managed to get my HF antenna back up, I think I said last podcast. I've done a few 20-metre contacts. Bands have not been that great in Europe. One of the things that really annoys me a little bit, though, and this is not a dig at you, Bill, Frank, or Ruth, is often there will only be 2 or 3 stations on the band calling, and they'll be calling CQ North America only. And I'm thinking, I'm here, I can have a contact with you. You're not actually working anybody in North America, but you're screaming North America only. And, in fairness, we could have a quick contact, one more for your log. But, I have to accept that's the way it is, and I don't go back to them because that's what I did. I have had a couple of contacts on Peanut, which is a voice over IP version of D-Star. Some 2-metre contacts, both FM and Fusion. And Martin, I will get the new code plugged to you for PMR if you really want to do it. As I say, and I've offered that for Chris, but I know you two get very frustrated with the continual changes. And as I say, mine seems to be working again now, so hopefully they won't change it yet again.
Well, maybe we'll give it a go, but if they're going to keep shooting themselves in the foot, I just lose interest, mate.
Yeah, I know, and I got very annoyed about it, but I've invested quite a bit of work in it, so mine's working. I'm willing to roll out to you and Chris, who've got similar radios to me, the Cobra, and we'll see what we can do. So that's pretty much it. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Thank you, Martin. Another interesting episode, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it really well. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you in mind, and I'll say we'll keep in touch. Yep. Mr. Frank Howell K4FMH.
Thank you. Enjoyed it again.
Yeah, great, another one. And Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Very welcome, and thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's great, mate. And Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX, who had to leave us a few seconds ago because he had a hard stop. So 73's due all. And this is not the end of the podcast, just the end of this section. 73's, guys.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. I'm sure, like my colleagues in London, you'll take up the opportunity of visiting the South Essex Amateur Radio Society's Canvey Radio and Electronics Fair, which is taking place on the 2nd of February 2020 in Canvey Island. Now, 500 of your fellow amateur radio enthusiasts will be attending this event, and along with those will be, say, some of the guys from London from the ICQ podcast. So look out for maybe some orange t-shirts dotted around, and say feel free to say hi to your favourite presenter or even that, say hi to one of the presenters and tell them who your favourite presenter is. Say, I'm sure they would appreciate that as well. Now, as always, as you'd expect, these sort of radio radios, you've got your usual eclectic mix of amateur radio dealers, computer dealers, bric-a-brac, clubs, etc. So, as I say, if you're in the area, I say go along. We're happy to help the guys out and accept their invitation, and they're fine supporters of the ICQ podcast. So, thanks a lot for inviting us to your rally, which is taking place on the 2nd of February. AMSAT in Argentina, known as AMSAT LU, are issuing a special certificate to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the launch of LUSAT LO19, and during LUSAT which takes place between the 18th and the 26th, so the first week after release of this show. On the 22nd of January 1990, LUSAT LO19 was launched along with AO16, DO17, WO18, UO14 and UO15. It was the first Argentinian satellite and the first to use PACSAT protocol. So we're going to put all the information you need to see how you can, gain this award during the next week, for working that special anniversary satellite. For the remainder of January, in Switzerland, members of the Association des Radio Amateurs de l'Écoute, HB9HI, will be active with a special event station, call sign HE2JOJ, until the end of January. This is to mark the 3rd edition of the Winter Youth Olympic Games, which is being hosted in Lausanne. And as always, as you'd expect, QSL cards, direct or via the Bureau, and a special certificate will be available as well. So as always, for these sort of things, all the information you need will be on icqpodcast.com. Well, now we head over to our features episode, where Martin answers questions and provides tips. Hopefully something for everyone to learn or ponder his thoughts. Hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's feature. This feature is about Elmering, really, and some of the questions I've been asked and some of the answers I've been given. I'm going to share them with you because they may help you Elmer other people, or if I've got it wrong, you can tell me. And finish up with a couple of tips that I found interesting, put it that way, and I think you might find some uses for them. Now, to start with, one of the questions I often get asked is, why can't I use the cigar lighter or cigarette lighter in the car to power my radio? Well, you can. It's just that it's not a very, very efficient socket and it doesn't work particularly well. However, the reason it doesn't work particularly well is because it doesn't get very, very good connections. You've usually got somewhere between 10 and 20 amps of current you can pull off this device, but because it's a bad connector, what tends to happen is you either get a voltage drop, so your rig's not running at full voltage, or you get heat build up, because if there's a high resistance in there, any resistance and current flowing, you will get heat build up. And then what happens is that the plug itself that you've plugged into your cigar lighter effectively disintegrates, because the plastic cooks and the plastic disintegrates. Now, a much better way of doing this, and I think that this is a good way of doing it, and I do it on my cars, is instead of drilling a hole through the bulkhead, because the bulkhead between the engine and the passenger's compartment is like a firewall. It's there for a reason. It's a safety device. Putting holes through it is not, in my opinion, a good idea. So, if you think about it, the back of the cigar lighter plug, the socket, actually has 2 wires going onto it. And if you can tap into those connectors, often with a parallel crimp connector, you can then pull 10 amps off of that without using the cigar lighter socket. And I often parallel leads onto the connectors at the back, in which case it gives me a good 10 amp supply within the cockpit of the car. So just a thought, saves you drilling holes through the bulkhead and one thing or another. Number 2, I think I answered this one correctly for the students, but equally, I'm willing to be armoured on it as well. And the question was, antenna wire. Can I use any old antenna wire? And technically you can, but the problem comes twofold. In that, when you think about it, the current on a RF signal flows on the surface of the wire. Now, if you use iron wire or steel wire and it rusts, you've obviously got high resistance there, so you would have a major problem getting out. Equally, even if it hasn't rusted, iron wire is got a higher resistance than, say, copper wire. And wherever you've got resistance, you're going to have a loss in your power, both transmit and receive. Now, the one I am not 100% sure on, and let's be honest about it, is it better to use stranded wire or solid wire? Now, if you use stranded wire, I favour, this is me, using insulated wire because the jacket on the wire stops corrosion getting in and water ingress and things like that. However, in fairness, you certainly will have a little bit of loss from the jacket. Not very much from the plastic jacket over the wire, but not a lot. What I don't know is, when I've seen this hard-drawn copper wire, which we use for antennas, what I don't know is, does the tarnish have resistance? So when you get nice copper wire, it's nice and shiny when you first get it. Over time, it goes that dull colour. And I just don't know whether, when it goes that dull colour, it's generated a little bit of extra resistance, because you can clean the tarnish off, and the tarnish is on the surface, and the RF flows on it. So, effectively, I'm saying, if you know better than me on this one, or you can Elmer me, please do. And I'm sure somebody out there, one of the listeners, will come back and say, Martin, you're being a fool, blah, blah, blah. But certainly, you've got to use antenna wire that has got a low resistance, because you don't want to be losing your power in the resistance of the wire. Moving on. The students are asking me about bandpass filters. Why do we need them? Well, your rig normally only has a low-pass filter, but a bandpass filter is designed so that only let the particular band you're working on through. So if you've got signals above or below the band that you're interested in, you want to cut those to a minimum. That helps your front end of your radio not get overloaded. And for argument's sake, if you are trying to operate multiple stations, like at field day, you will have maybe a 40-metre station, a 20-metre station, a 10-metre station, etc., all fairly close together. And majority of our bands are harmonically related, so they will tend to interfere with it if you're in very close proximity. So the idea is that you cut the signals both above and below the frequencies you want to work, so that you don't hear the other stations. And even if you're not running in say a field day situation where you've got multiple stations on, having a bandpass filter for a particular band will improve your reception on that particular band. So yeah, bandpass filters are worth having. Bearing in mind, low-pass filters fitted to amateur radio rigs are really there to kill off any harmonics of the operating frequency you're working on. So they don't act as bandpass filters in the majority of rigs. Moving on, I get asked, what CTCSS code should I use, or what are they using? I found this station, can't work out what CTCSS code they're using. Well, if you're in the UK, and I'm sure the other parts of the world have similar books, or you search on the internet. But if you're on a repeater, if you're looking for a repeater, you look that repeater's call sign up, and usually it'll tell you what CTCSS code that particular repeater is using. And we are somewhat lucky because as amateurs we only use a small subset of the CTCSS tones that are available to us. Now, if you can't find that, or if it's one you don't know, some rigs have a CTCSS scanner on them, so you can set the radio up and then ask it to scan for the CTCSS tone. Now, I know full well that the FT817 does this, so if you're in a foreign country and you're hear a repeater and you basically can work out what the shift is, but you don't know what the CTCSS is to access the repeater, then effectively you tune into the repeater and you select the CTCSS decode and away you go. But that's a couple of options. Normally lookup is the easiest one. CTCSS scanning is another option. Now, this one is so obvious it's almost not worth mentioning, but it's new students often get this, and I suffered this problem the other day myself at home. I was on SSB, 20 metres SSB, and my good lady Mrs. B runs up the stairs and she says, "Here, you're making horrible noise on your computer speakers." And effectively, computer speakers are our biggest nightmare. They're usually poorly manufactured and they are susceptible to RF. And often the interconnecting leads and the feed lead from your amplifier, so they act like an antenna, effectively. Easiest way around it, a clamp-on ferrite, a couple of turns around a clamp-on ferrite, end of, no more noise. So that works very well, and worked very well for me. It stopped my good lady getting very upset with me while she was watching telly, and I was on HF, hi. Now, moving on, I did say tips, and I came across these two, one I actually use and one I'm in the process of using. We like to think of ourselves as green and recycling. I came across an article on the internet and I've tried it out and it really does work. Milk bottle tops. In the UK we have plastic milk bottles and coloured tops, red, blue, green, etc. and some other colours as well. These are made out of food grade plastic, and if you look at them they have a sign on them which is a triangle with a number 2 in them. Now, if it's plastic with a triangle and a number 2 stamped on it, these melt. This plastic melts at about 190 degrees. So if you collect enough milk bottle top, or even milk bottle containers themselves, the plastic ones, they will melt down. So you stick them in an oven on a baking tray, and I suggest you go out and buy a separate baking tray and don't use one of your wife's, because that really will get you into problems. And you probably need to vent the kitchen at the same time, or wherever you're going to do it. And you can melt the plastic down. Now, why would I want to melt it down? Well, if I can melt these milk bottle tops or milk bottles down, I can then have a malleable plastic, and I can make a mould for it. Now, you could make a simple mould that produces, say, a bar. So once they're all molten, you roll it into the mould and you squish it down into a bar. Once it cools, you've got a lump of plastic that you can cut, drill, or whatever to build all sorts of things. And very, very useful device. You can build antenna, insulators, dipole centers, all those sort of things. But you make them yourself out of recycling. And once again, we become very green and maybe of use to you. So, it's not just those items you could use. A lot of other items you could actually use and do yourself. The last one, and once again, not really rocket science. About a year ago, I was playing with home automation stuff. And there's a company called Sonoff, a Chinese company, Sonoff, and they produce a number of mains switches, electrical switches, both for the US and the UK, and they are Wi-Fi controlled. So you can either Wi-Fi control them, or in some instances you can control them by UHF, but I prefer the Wi-Fi ones. And what are they useful for? Well, think about it. If you've got a hotspot or a repeater and you've put it in the loft and you want to reset the power on it, you've got to climb a ladder, get a ladder out, go up through the hatch and all the bits and pieces. These things are great. You plug them in. Once they're plugged into the mains, they've got mains control on them. And you can actually switch off a device, completely shut it down, switch it off. And in the case of a hotspot, you can actually do a cold start, which may clear bad issues out. So, quite a useful one. I think it's very useful. They could be very useful for having remote shacks. You know, if you've got a remote shack somewhere, you don't want to necessarily leave the receiver on all the time. What you can do, as long as they can connect to a Wi-Fi somewhere, you can connect to them anywhere in the world and turn them back on, apply power. So, just a thought. The basic Sonoff device, I think, is less than $5, and you can control it via your smartphone or from the internet and switch them on and off. So, just a few ideas. I'd certainly be interested if anybody's got ideas on the antenna wire, because I openly admit I don't know it all and never will do. But as I say, just a few suggestions that I've given to students, and the last two being a couple of tips that you might be able to take what I've done and take it further and modify it and make it very useful for yourself. I hope this was of use.
The ICQ Podcast. Getting it said for amateur radio.
Well, there, Dad, another great pulled together job on a feature for this episode there, answering questions and tips along the way, and hopefully something, of course, for all our listeners, as I say, old and new, you can always find something to say by sharing knowledge. So thanks a lot, Dad, there for doing that feature for us there.
Well, I like to try an Elmer, Colin, so I think it's kind of an Elmer thing. And there is one question I've also thrown out to our listeners to see if they know anything better than me on one of the subjects. So be prepared for some feedback.
Okay. I shall keep an eye on that. So, guys, always for feedback, visit icqpodcast.com, click on the feedback section, and pop back what you'd like to let us know, and we'll pick it up in this section there in a future episode. Now, as you're probably aware, we've had no adverts this episode. I was listening to a podcast the other day, 7.5 minutes of adverts before the content started. And to make sure you didn't have to suffer, all sorts of weird and wonderful things to buy, we need to thank Costatina Papas, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra. Always drops us, a donation every year. Thank you very much, Dino, for, popping that our way. We greatly do appreciate it. And Leslie Boddington, I believe G4 Juliet Delta Charlie, didn't have a message in from me yet to say on the show, but pop in anything you wish to let us know. So thanks a lot, guys, for supporting the show and continue to keep us advert free. We always like to thank the guys who help us out with the round table. This episode, Chris Howard, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Ed DD5 Lima Papa, and Bill November 3 Juliet India X-Ray. Thanks a lot for taking part there in the news round table. So only a few months ago to Dayton Hamvention, and good news is today I've booked our accommodation, so we're definitely going along with the flights we booked before Christmas. We're going to try and get some planning done for some stuff to do while at Dayton Hamvention. We'll let you know in due course, what will be going on there with the ICQ podcast team. But in the meantime, you can keep up to date with what we're doing. Sign up for our newsletter by visiting us at the ICQ podcast page and click on the newsletter subscription there, or join the Facebook group, or our Twitter handles at Colin Butler and at M1MRB for the latest news information about what's going on with the podcast. Talking about Hamvention, we've still got all the videos from last year's Hamvention and the RSGB's Hamfest as well. You can check out those interviews by going to youtube.com/ICQ podcast. Click on the subscribe button there as well, and as we get through this year, we'll pop new content into that section as well for you. I think I've just done all I noticed there, Dad. So I'll ask you before wrapping up. Is there anything else that you're doing over the next fortnight? You might like to let us and listeners know.
Well, we'll do that, Colin, but I've got to say, I'm really pleased you booked the accommodation, because I was getting worried we were going to be putting tents up in somebody's backyard.
Don't joke, you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Oh, we were close. Now, guys, we're looking forward to Hamvention. I believe there will be 8 of us over there again this year. Unfortunately, Edmund can't make it, but instead of Edmund, we'll have Ruth with us. So there'll be 8 of us, and look out for the orange T-shirts, and that'll be good. Now, Colin says we don't do adverts, and he's dead right, we don't do adverts. But just to let you guys know, I will be at the South Essex Amateur Radio Society's rally, the rally on Canvey Island, on the 2nd of February. Now, I'm going, I think Chris is going, and Martin may also be going. And we've been invited down to the rally just to come along and say hi to everybody. So certainly looking forward to that one, Colin. And hopefully you'll put it in the newsletter and on the website. This rally is happening. So, yeah, we'll be there. And thanks to Richard and Dorothy for inviting us via Tony. Tony's the gentleman running the rally, G0JYI. And as I say, we're looking forward to it. 2nd of February, Sunday morning, out there in Essex, Canvey Island. So, interesting things happening, Colin.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can call it an advert, because I know how much it costs us to attend rallies. So, I don't think an advert is necessarily defined as something that costs us money. So I think we're okay with promoting the rally there. And then look, the guys, I know Richard and Dorothy are great fans of the ICQ podcast and do their bit as well, promote us. So at least we can do is help them out as well, give them a bit of a dig out, and promote their rally as well, and pop along to that there. Right, well, that wraps up episode 316 of your ICQ podcast. As I say, the most important thing we have to do, as I say, at this time of the day, is to make sure that chocolate biscuits are found and cups of tea are made for Mrs. B. So, as I say, I shall let you go, Dad, and find that biscuit and cup of tea for Mum.
Yeah, no problems at all, Colin. The kettle's about to go on. I've got the chocolate biscuit ready. And your mum be in within the next 10 minutes. So as long as her manager hasn't upset her, she'll be in a good mood. Hi.
Well, fingers crossed then. Well, I've been 73 to you, 73s to all our listeners, and we'll catch up all again in a fortnight's time, guys. Look after yourself, 73s.
Yeah, 73 all.